Melanie Rabone was a young woman with depression. She'd been cared for at home by her parents, who'd done their very best to keep her safe, but sadly she was in such a severe bout of depression that she tried to take her own life on more than one occasion. And ultimately she agreed with her parents that the best thing would be for her to go into hospital until she felt better, whilst she was at such a high risk of taking her own life. And she became a voluntary patient in a psychiatric hospital. Whilst she was in hospital, she asked for some home leave, and one of the doctors there allowed her to go home despite the fact that she was still at high risk of suicide, and her parents had expressed their concern about her going home. Very sadly, when Melanie was at home during this period of home leave, she did take her own life.
It was April when she died. As spring came into summer, I wrote a fairly lengthy letter of complaint to the hospital, the trust, basically expressing our view that we thought the hospital was responsible, and the consultant in particular. But it was the new year when a panel of 3 members of the investigating team came to talk to us.
We covered various aspects of it, and they told us at that point that they were hopeful that the results would be published in a matter of 6 to 8 weeks, something along those lines. But time went on and we got sort of more delaying tactics, if you like.
We were concerned. One of her friend's husbands suggested that we take legal advice and suggested Pannone. We got a very quick response saying that they thought we did have a case against the hospital, the trust, to claim that the hospital had breached Melanie's right to life. And that's how the proceedings started.
I think I was very naive as regards the law and what happens, and because I felt so strongly that it was so obvious that this was a travesty, and that therefore the legal system would see that, and you know, we'd win. But we didn't. We lost on everything.
Pannone's reaction was that it was a very bad verdict, and their reaction immediately was that we should appeal to the Court of Appeal to have the judgment overturned.
I think they were as disappointed as we were at the outcome of the initial trial.
Well, at the Court of Appeal, they overturned a couple of points that we'd lost on at the first trial, but not the fundamental point. Their feeling was maybe it wouldn't be worth going forward, but it was after consideration that they thought that yes, it would be worth it if we wanted to take it forward further. And it was then the issue of funding came into it, because Pannone couldn't get any more insurance cover for us. The partners at Pannone had a meeting, and their managing partner, Emma Holt, came back to us and said that Pannone itself would take the risk at the Supreme Court on our costs, and were very supportive of us going forward. Without that, we just couldn't have gone any further with the case.
It was never about the money. It was always about the injustice of what had happened, about the principles, basically, of what had gone wrong with me and what had happened to Melanie.
The day before the judgment was given out, we were contacted, because that's the point where we would be allowed to know, and basically they said we'd won on everything, and would we be coming down to London.
The important issue in Mr and Mrs Rabone's case was really getting some acknowledgement that the treatment Melanie had received wasn't appropriate, but also just to bring those doctors to account. And it was a battle throughout to really get to the truth and to have their own case vindicated. And by the time we'd fought it all the way through to the Supreme Court, they finally had that vindication with a unanimous result from the justices of the Supreme Court.
All the way along from the first meeting to the final judgment at the Supreme Court, Pannone were very supportive, and empathetic is probably the right word. It's almost like having a shoulder there for you, both during the proceedings and after the proceedings. There was always a very personal touch to it. The law has changed, because now any patient who is in a psychiatric unit of a hospital in the UK now is owed the same duty of care and has the same protection whether they're detained or not detained, which previously hadn't been the case.
I mean, we'll never get Melanie back, but at least we've had recognition that what happened was very wrong. And not only that, I think it does help that hopefully that sort of thing would never happen to anybody else. And we know from friends that, and from Pannone, that there have been other instances since the judgment where it's made a difference to the treatment that other people have received who've been in similar sort of circumstances. So that does help. And I think Melanie would have approved.